Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Keeping the Real in Real Estate. I'm Trisha Farron. I'm a real estate agent in Newtown, Connecticut with William Ravis, and I'm putting this podcast together to help people understand what's actually happening in the field. There's so much information that's going on in the media that causes me to just tilt my head and say, where are they getting this? That I find myself repeating myself over and over to very surprised buyers and sellers because they're used to hearing one thing from the media, and not that that's not actually happening, but it's not happening to the extent of what they're reporting. So I'm putting this podcast together, and I'm going to be putting two episodes out each month for the year to give you an idea of what's actually happening with the way buyers and sellers think, how negotiations are going, what's happening with interest rates, what's happening with the way in which people are preparing their homes, all sorts of different information to keep you in the know of what's actually happening. Now, I will say what might be happening in Ohio or Florida or Texas or California may be completely different. In fact, it probably is. I'm from Connecticut, and I'm going to be reporting on what my experiences are helping buyers and sellers in Connecticut. So I can't really speak to anything going on in the country and the world. I can only tell you what's happening in my little area here of the country, and it may or may not be similar to what you're experiencing, but it'll give you an idea of what's happening here. I'm not an economist. I'm not a market analyst. I'm a real estate agent, and I'm working with people every single day and talking them through what's been happening. Asking, should I buy or sell right now, is one of the most popular questions. And it's interesting to see the myths that people are living by based on what they've either read, heard, or spoken to with other folks. So I'm not going to say that your experience is going to be exactly what I'm experiencing or different. I'm just telling you this is what I'm experiencing, and I'm buying and helping buyers and sellers every single day. So it's not like months are going by between transactions. I feel confident in knowing that I can predict what's going to happen in the next few months based on what I'm seeing. But there are definitely things completely out of my control that may happen at the end of the year or by summer that can change things from what's happening right now. So I can just say that I'm going to be monitoring things closely and reporting on what I'm experiencing. So today I am going to be talking about what I expect to see in the coming year based on what I'm seeing right now. There's a lot of misconception that we're in a housing crash, and it's not a crash. People still remember very vividly what happened in 2008, and that's not what's happening. First of all, sellers have a ton of equity in their homes, which was not a situation in 2008. And second of all, the inventory is what's causing the dynamic to stabilize, really. Prior to 2020, we had an inventory shortage. So when a buyer would go out, they would have to make a decision relatively quickly if they wanted that property. And relatively quickly could have been a week, maybe 5 days, maybe 2 weeks, depending on the property. Then COVID hit and life went into such a frenzy. I some days didn't even know what day of the week it was or what my name was because the hysteria and manic way that people were doing business, it was just crazy. It was very difficult to assess prices of houses to determine what would be the best offers to do. People just wanted the houses, and that was it. There was just get me the house, whatever it takes. So that craziness kind of set an expectation for people. Now here we are 2.5, 3 years later. And that's just not the way things are working right now. It's almost like we've gone back to pre-COVID. There's still very low inventory. The difference is that the interest rates have gone up. So when there was low inventory and low interest, people were willing to spend a little bit more on the house, even if they spent more than what it was actually valued at, because lending was cheap. It didn't cost much to borrow money. But with it doubling right now, buyers are scared. They can't afford a higher monthly payment and also put down all this tons of money and pay extra. It's just a triple threat, and it's just too much for them to handle. So what we're seeing right now is a huge demand for buyers who have been scared over 2021, watching the interest rates just climb and kind of putting a pause on things and saying, okay, let me think about this, because I don't want to overpay and I don't want to get myself into a pickle of having to pay a higher mortgage, put too much money down, and pay over. But sellers are kind of still thinking that buyers are going to do these make these ridiculous decisions to pay all this money. So we're kind of a little bit at an impasse. If the house is on the market for longer than 2 weeks, the sellers are thinking, oh my goodness, why is this? And if a buyer sees a house that has been on the market for a month, they're thinking, oh, what's wrong with the house? So let's start from scratch. We're no longer in the COVID frenzy. We are in an inventory shortage. So if a house is priced right and is beautiful, it's going to go quickly. And it still could go for over asking, but not 50 or 100 over asking. Maybe 5 or 10, maybe 15 over asking. Buyers now can ask sellers for concessions. If there's something wrong with the house after inspection, sellers can still be expected now to fix it. There was a point where you would put in your offer well over asking, no appraisal contingency, no inspection requests, no credits at closing, nothing. Because if you asked for anything, they would ignore your contract and go right to the next person. That's not the case anymore. There's actually an opportunity to say, hey, there's some deficiencies in this house that we'd like you to take care of. Or we need a little bit of help with closing costs, so we would like you to do it. Now the big thing is sellers paying down the interest rate a little bit instead of other concessions. This is not in addition to. And that helps keep the monthly mortgage manageable for the buyer without having to go crazy offering all these extra things, and without taking too much out of the seller's pocket as well. So when sellers price the house properly and don't expect to go crazy, and they're willing to negotiate, there are an abundance of buyers out there who are looking to get into the home ownership market. Renting is really expensive, and as we all know, renting is a 100% interest rate to somebody else's mortgage. So they're still trying to get out of that realm and be a homeowner. There are a ton of first-time home buyers out there, and they are just not in the know of what to expect about what this process is about. So it's really important to help them understand what the mortgage process is like, what the inspection process is like. There's this misconception that if you offer over asking, that when it comes time for inspection, you can kind of get some of your money back when you start nitpicking at all things. That's not what the intention of an inspection is. The intention of an inspection is to make sure that there's nothing dramatically wrong with this house that's going to cost you a fortune. Since it's almost always not new construction, you have to expect that there's going to be some wear and tear in the house. Yeah, it might need painting. Some of the floors might be scuffed. There could be some moisture in the basement. There could be some leaking in a pipe. Could these things be rectified? Of course. But do you go into it saying, oh, I'm going to be able to knock down some money from this? That's a terrible way of thinking. If you want the house and it is meeting at least 80 to 85% of your criteria, then you need to be understanding. And if you've offered a price that's a reasonable price, the seller will also need to be understanding. And together you have somebody who wants to sell and somebody who wants to buy. You can put this deal together and everybody feels good about it instead of one party feeling slighted. So setting expectations is a huge important factor in making sure that the deal is going to go through the way you want it to go through. If a seller puts the price way too high thinking that their house is worth all this money, but the market doesn't have that same opinion, the house is going to sit. It doesn't matter how beautiful it is. If it's overpriced, us as agents, we know this because we're looking at the comps, we're looking at other properties that are on the market and saying, that house is way too overpriced. Let's wait until it comes down. On the buyer side, if you think that you can offer $50,000 less than asking price, you're not going to get the house. All you're doing is wasting time. So I think everybody needs to set expectations about what everybody's trying to accomplish and how to go about doing it. It may take some research both on the seller and buyer side, and that's where your agent comes into play. As a listing agent, I'm going to look at the comps because in the end, I need to justify to an appraiser how I came up with this price. I can't just look at them and be like, I don't know, we just picked a number, because you're going to look stupid and the deal's going to fall apart. When I put a listing together, I not only look at what's closed that matches the kind of house in the area in which that house is, I also look at expireds to see if a house expired in this market, why? Was it that they had a change of heart, or was it that the house wasn't priced right, or was it a mess? Like, what was it that caused it to not sell? Typically, a listing has 6 months to do that, so if you don't sell in 6 months, something's weird. So I take a look at that. I take a look at the withdrawals, temporarily off markets, and I come up with an average price of what I think the house is going to sell for, and then we put a pricing strategy together. When I'm working with buyers, I do the same thing. If they say, we really love this house, we want to put an offer, the first thing I do is I go back and I look at the comps. And I say, because we don't know, just because the house is on the market for $300,000 doesn't mean that's the right price for the house. So I want to make sure that when we put in an offer, it makes sense and will appraise. Because to me, the appraisal is paramount to making sure that this deal goes through. Because if it doesn't appraise today, it's a little different if it didn't appraise in like 2020 and 2021. Another thing to watch is the interest rates. Right now, they're a little bit on a stabilized motion. The analysts predict that it's going to be somewhere just south of 6 or just north of 6 by the end of the year. This is still a good interest rate. It's because our mindset is that they were at the threes not too long ago, that, oh my goodness, the interest rate is so high. It's higher, yes, no doubt, but it's not unattainable, and it doesn't make it price prohibitive to get a house. So a couple of things have to happen. You need to redo your pre-approval to make sure at the new interest rates you know where your parameters are. And you either need to buy a house that's a little bit less in price, or you have to put down some more money. But you could still buy a house. And not buying a house means that you're still paying rent to somebody. You need to stop paying rent. It's a no-win. You are just paying somebody else's mortgage. So wouldn't it be better to pay your mortgage even if you're paying at a little bit of a higher rate than you'd like? There are deals out there where you can get an adjustable rate for a fixed rate for a short amount of time, and then changes to adjustable. You can have the seller buy down your rates, the almost 2 points the first year, 1 point the next year, and then it goes back to wherever the market rate is. You can also get locked into a fixed mortgage and refinance when the rates go down. Now, just a side note on refinancing, because this is a common mistake that even veteran homeowners do. You take out a mortgage for 30 years. In the beginning of your mortgage, you're paying more interest than principal in your payment, and it changes as it goes towards that 30 year. If you saw the difference of interest and principal from month 1 to month 360, you'd be amazed at the proportion of what goes to principal. So when you refinance, it starts the clock over again and starts the 30 years over again and starts that higher percentage of interest that you're paying. So if possible, either shrink the number of years, or if you can put in additional funds just so that you keep those proportions equal, so that you're not paying a mortgage for 50 years or 40 years depending on when you refinance. And I'm happy to discuss that in further detail, as it was a smack in the face when I realized the mistake that we were making every time we refinanced. The economy is another thing. Right now, job market is good. Unemployment is low. But if all of a sudden everything tanks and people are getting laid off left and right, that's obviously going to affect how willing people are going to be to buy a house. So that's another component that I'm just going to keep watching throughout the year and see where we stand. I could tell you right now, here we are in January, first week in January, and I have buyers calling me nonstop that were kind of on a pause last year. I have sellers getting ready to sell their homes in January. I mean, usually it's spring market. Well, there's going to be homes listed within weeks, um, because they want to get it sold so that they can move on. Some are moving out of state, others are staying within. They're just making a change. And not everybody's downsizing. I have a client who's tripling the size of his house. Everybody's needs are different. I think what is important to know for 2023 is there are plenty of buyers out there. There are sellers who still want to sell their home. Everybody needs to be realistic. Yeah, the interest rates are higher than before, but they are not so high that you can't buy a house. The economy will play a big role, and we just need to watch it because we can't control it. So we just need to be in the know. Stop listening to the media because they are hyped on negative information. There's It's not as bad as they're saying that it is, and it's not going to get as bad as they're saying that it's going to get. One other word for investors: there are still foreclosures out there. There are plenty of opportunities to flip because there are properties that are distressed and could can use some love. Um, Maybe you're not going to make $200,000 on each flip, but there is money to be made out there, and I'm happy to help with that as well. I think the biggest thing is just please set your expectations and ask questions. I'm here, I'm available if you just want to chat, even if you're not thinking of buying or selling, but you want to get a better handle on what's going on in the marketplace. Just give me a buzz. I do this for my clients, I do this for others in the industry. People like to talk about real estate, and I love to talk about real estate. So until next time, I'm Trisha Farron. I'm a real estate agent with William Ravis, and this is Keeping the Real in Real Estate. Thanks for joining me.